What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Starting Five. We are back after a short hiatus. He's Coach Nick. I'm Ben. Coach, what's going on?
Well, I guess I was on the bench for a little while, but now we're back in the starting lineup in the starting five.
It's good to be back on the hardwood and playing a little bit. You know, we were going to lead this segment. Obviously, the two of us haven't spoken and done this show since there's been a new commissioner in the league, but I want to lead with a story that's really transcended all of sports over the past few days, and that's Michael Sam. For those of you who aren't familiar with Sam, he's a defensive end from the University of Missouri, a legitimate NFL prospect, projected 3rd to 5th round pick, who recently came out, and he's also the SEC Defensive Player of the Year, came out Sunday evening as gay. So he'd be the first active player in one of the 4 major sports to be, I guess, announced as gay playing. And the reaction around the league is that in the NFL, GMs didn't really put their name on it. And a couple guys said that, you know, he might be a distraction, that he may not even get drafted, even if the talent is there. Major League Baseball GMs and executives have said, no, we're going to go ahead and draft the best player available. If he can help us win, we're going to do that. They put their name on it. I think when it comes to the NBA, and tell me if you agree, NBA would absolutely take on somebody like this because it's a league and a situation that knows themselves and are very comfortable with themselves as well.
For sure. I mean, if we remember when Magic came out with HIV, that sparked a lot of real problematic language from some players. We know Karl Malone had said some stuff that was inflammatory, and Tim Hardaway.
Sure.
And so I feel like they've already gone through that whole trial by fire notion, and I think the culture is already much more welcoming as it is. And I know that John Amici, when he played, even though he wasn't out, said that it didn't seem like it would have been an issue had everybody known about it. And I think that there's some people he was close with that did know about it, were accepting about it. So I wouldn't think that it would be much of an issue, and that maybe one day, hopefully soon, it wouldn't even have to make news.
I really hope that ultimately becomes the situation where it's just, it's part of somebody's outside life. The players don't care. They just want the best person there. And, someone will say, well, what about Jason Collins? He doesn't have a job right now. Well, the problem is Jason Collins is a much older player who really wasn't contributing all that much last year. A very good veteran presence, a guy that maybe a few years ago you knew there'd be a role for him, but teams, really didn't need someone like Collins this year. Rick Welts, is the president of the Warriors, actually commented on this story and said that Sam is absolutely the right guy to take on this challenge. And I certainly hope that if there are players in the NBA or players at the college ranks that feel like they can move on in this sort of in the same way that Michael Sam did and announce publicly and come out and say who they are, it's going to be respected. I think the NBA could absolutely handle that. Yeah,
for sure. And we know it's there's no way that there aren't players right now in the NBA who are gay, I'm sure. And you know what? It's none of my business either way, and I'm sure that's how they feel. I would shudder to think that they feel that they're gonna there's gonna be repercussions for that.
Sure.
And it could very well just be that they just are private people that don't want to have to deal with that. But I would be shocked to discover if a player in the NBA came out, if he would really have real issues in the locker room or with teammates. It would be surprising to me.
It would be very surprising. And to Michael Sam, a very, very bold and very courageous move to come out. It's the way that he did, and we certainly wish him well. Detroit Pistons, as we sort of move on there. Sunday, Coach Joe Dumars let someone fall on the sword for his bad moves again. Mo Cheeks is out. Joe Loyer is in. And Bill Simmons, I got to give him credit, on Sunday listed all of the bad moves since the championship that Joe Dumars has had. They've gone through a lot of different coaches. They each have fallen on the sword for a lot of his moves. Are we getting to a point where are the Pistons ever going to be a contender again until Joe Dumars is out of that situation?
I mean, we saw that with the Clippers when they had their Hall of Fame GM running the show for a long time and couldn't ever really put something together. And you know what? It looks that way. I mean, granted, they've had success. They did put that one team together, but there's no question that Cheeks was in a rough situation. I'm not so sure he's a great coach. He's very vanilla. What they ran is very much ho-hum, straight NBA stuff. And that said, I will say we went through the game last night when they beat the Spurs, and Loyer is doing a couple of things differently now with some more motion, and it's encouraging, which is also a reflection on what Mo Cheeks was not doing. So I don't know if I have a problem with Mo Cheeks getting fired. I suppose the problem really was, why did they hire him?
Right. That's a great point. And in Dumars' defense, the story was that the owner, Tom Gores, was upset with the team's disappointing start. They obviously spent a lot of money, the Josh Smith contract, and Dumar's push for Cheeks to stay a little bit longer and have more time. But at some point, the pixie dust has to wear off, and you have to start making people accountable. Detroit really hasn't done a whole lot in a long time, and Dumars has made some questionable moves along the way. I'd be curious to see if they continue to struggle and they don't make the playoffs in a terrible, terrible East. What happens then? From one coach that has struggled in Mo Cheeks to a coach that somehow just finds ways to win. And that's Tom Thibodeau. And I hate saying that, Coach, because I feel like it's so cliche. Tom Thibodeau gets the most out of his players. But Jeff Van Gundy came out this week and said that there's nobody that does a better job with his team and the players that he has than Tom Thibodeau. And he said that on the Carmen Yurko show on ESPN Radio in Chicago. He said, I would suspect that he would be back for a long time. I know he loves the city. He loves the team. You can tell. Yes, he loves the team. It's a great place for him to be. But the problem is there's friction there with him in the general office and the front office. How do they make this work?
Well, you might remember that back in the day, there was more friction than you could imagine between Phil Jackson and Jerry Krause and Jerry Reinsdorf. So
sure.
It's not like these things don't ever work out when you had that kind of friction. And John Paxson is now the general manager who was knee-deep in that at the time as a player. So I have no doubt, they could make it work. It's when you have a nice situation as a coach, the last thing you're going to want to do is jump into something else you don't know about. And
right.
That's what Thibodeau would have to do. Jump into another situation where maybe the players aren't the same kind of players that want to buy into his defensive system. He has to start over again because he's got a lot of concepts that other coaches don't teach. So I would be surprised if he was just going to jump out of his contract, in spite or to spite the front office for their moves like getting rid of his lead assistant and that kind of stuff. Right.
When Rod Adams was fired, that was basically a huge power hold from Gar Forman, which, Adams, basically the story was that he had some disparaging things to say about the organization, and Gar got upset and said, you're not going to be able to do that on my watch. And I think if you're going to have a power struggle over little moves like this and you risk losing a coach that with the right players around him can get you to a national championship, that's a real issue. And again, Gar Forman and John Paxson, they just don't see eye to eye, especially when it comes to minutes for guys and resting guys. And of course, we talked about Ron Adams. But they need to make this work long-term because Thibs is too talented of a coach. And we've seen coaches do make a difference in the NBA. If you have players buying in, it does make all the difference in the world. I think that sort of goes without saying.
Absolutely. And, it's going to be Thibodeau's decision. There's no way Paxson and Foreman could fire him. They'd get run out of town.
He can't go to the Knicks, for example.
Say
right? He's not going to the Knicks.
Oh, I would be shocked. I mean, I would think that what Paxson and Foreman have to do is get Melo over to Chicago. Like, that's what they need to do. We haven't heard them do a splash, move in a while. They've been resting on the laurels of Derrick Rose being injured, and that's been buying them time. But you know what? At some point soon, they're gonna have to make a move or do something to make Chicago get to that next level that they had shown promise for, or else they'll be gone.
You brought up the Knicks. That helps us transition to our next topic here on the Starting Five with Coach Nick. I'm Ben. Talk about losing teams. 76ers they're not just losing anymore, Coach. They're losing in style. 2 consecutive games by 40 or more points. You had 45 to the Clippers on Sunday, 43 to the Warriors on Monday. The only team, by the way, ever to lose back-to-back 40-point games was the 94 Philadelphia 76ers. You remember when they were a great story early on in the year? Now, not so much, but I think you think that's actually okay.
Yeah, I mean, the young legs in the beginning of the year have lots of energy, but they have now gone beyond. It's no question in my mind. I mean, they have enough young players where they typically will play 30 or maybe 40 games in a college season. Well, guess what? We are now just past that mark, and here we go. Defensively, they're just getting lit up. From everywhere, and that's a lot has to do with effort and energy. So the only question here is, you hear guys like, Chiefs gets fired, and there's a couple other guys who are maybe on the hot seat, but it seems like Brett Brown took his time and really made sure that they were going to stick with him, and no matter what, because obviously they are incentivized to lose, they're going to also add Nerlens Noel, and when you add basically 2 number 1 picks or whatever they're going to get this year, which is going to be the equivalent because they're such good players, they're going to be awesome very soon.
And factor in the guys and the picks that they might be able to pick up when they trade Evan Turner. Thaddeus Young is still a possibility to be traded. I like Spencer Hawes, and I think he's made a lot of improvements this year. But again, he's a bit of a defensive liability. I'd go ahead and trade him if you believe that Noel is the guy for the future. You certainly drafted him to be. So we'll see what happens. Ultimately, I think they're sitting pretty, as you said. And right now, if you're a 76ers fan, it's just a little bit hard to watch, knowing that the effort was there early on. And, as a fan, you like to see that a little bit later on in the season. But long term, this is what's best for them.
Absolutely. And we're not going to see that many more blowouts like this. I'm fairly certain they're going to get it under control, keep these games somewhat close, until someone gets injured. But when they have, they had most of their guys last night, so that's the only concern. But I feel like, yeah, you're not going to see too many more of these blowouts. There's a lot of bad teams they get to play.
One more to go here on the starting five, and that's the All-Star Weekend coming up in New Orleans. It's All-Star Weekend is always fun, Coach. I'm sure you've seen your fair share of them and been to a few along the way. Give me the one thing you're most excited for heading into the weekend.
I don't know. I'm not a real big fan of the All-Star game, believe it or not. The game itself, I rarely watch. And so I think the one thing that caught my mind with it was the skills challenge. I like that. And I believe they are doing that again this year, correct, with the point guards?
They are.
So that I like. That's interesting to me because obviously that's something that the skill and the players generally take that pretty seriously.
They do. And even though the last several years, the slam dunk competition, it's never going to be what it was in the late 80s and the early 90s when people are still going back and watching those types of tapes and what Vince Carter did. It was remarkable. But to me, it's still the best event of the weekend because you're still seeing new and creative and original ideas. Listen, Blake Griffin dunked over a car. Kind of, sort of. He didn't actually go over the whole length of the car, but it was still fun and people got into it. Anthony Davis actually just posted a video. I don't know if it was him or one of his teammates, him throwing the basketball off the wall and doing a windmill and throwing it home. And he said at the end of words, put me in the dunk contest. Hometown guy in New Orleans. The fact that he didn't even make the All-Star game before he got in was a travesty. He's now in, at least playing in that game, but throw the local guy in the dunk contest, have him do a surprise appearance, and I think you got a nice little story.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's in the rookie, the Rising Stars thing, I believe, right? So he's going to be playing somewhere, but it's
he'll dominate that game too, by the way.
Right, and by the way, I don't remember the last couple of years have been pretty screwy as far as who's making the All-Star team and who's not, and I hope they can fix this because it really is crazy how they've left some people off and not gotten other people on, or people made it. I will say that I was at the '87 dunk contest in Chicago with Nick and MJ. So, obviously nothing is going to match that ever, I don't think. When I watch that, the 3-point contest, though, I also do enjoy watching. That seems to be fraught with lots of tension and drama.
What do you think before we go? Was Jordan's foot on the line?
Oh, his foot was on the line, but, do you think he wouldn't have made it if he's been on the line? I mean, come on.
I think he would have been just fine. So there you
go. By
the
way, he had 2 of them in that contest, if you don't remember. He did it earlier, and then he did it to win.
That's right.
The first one, I believe, was behind the line. So,
all right. Listen, you and I both are huge Jordan fans, like the biggest Jordan fans. We'll probably end up giving it to him along the way. There you go, everybody. That's this week's starting five. We hope to do it again when Coach and I are able to get our lives together and get a little bit of time. Coach, leave him with something interesting.
Well, I don't know. I would say keep your eyes on the Warriors because, I don't know, I'm getting the impression that they might not make the playoffs.
Pretty crazy if you would have had this conversation about 2-3 weeks ago. He's Coach. I'm Ben. Coach will tell you no flipping. I'll say no flopping. We'll talk to you next time.
No flipping.